Good morning, everyone, and welcome to my second milestone. I will begin this presentation by pointing out the various fields of knowledge that fuse into my research. Then I will introduce you to my studio practice. And finally, I will talk a little bit about my background, which shapes my affinity for this practice led research into picture recitation. So, picture recitation is the art of storytelling in verse, accompanied with a visual prop like you see here, a scroll and a wooden box with painted panels which unfold during the storytelling. These are just two of the numerous picture recitation practices that were once active in India but are now practiced within a very small community of artists who reside in villages away from urban patronage and speak in regional languages. Through my practice, I am interested in exploring this genre of art as an outsider, not belonging to such artist communities without committing any cultural or ethical misappropriation. The research began last year, and there were many elements new to my own artistic practice with which I had to get acquainted. Generally, the storytellers you saw previously tell stories based on religious mythology. I wanted to contemporize the narratives with inclusion of science fiction and spent my first year reading about neuroscience and a little bit about microbiology and writing short stories about the body using knowledge from these sciences. Thus, in my practice, empirical facts from the sciences now replace the concept of the divine from the religious and mythical themes of Indian arts. The reviews I received at the last milestone were positive and no changes were suggested to my research plan. In the current year, I transitioned to writing verses, but due to the chaos of the pandemic, I could not compose any long poems for picture recitation, but rather short verses. The fields of sciences expanded to include more readings into microbiology and phytochemistry, which is plant chemistry. Simultaneously, I also invested studio hours into image making for the short verses, and for this, I looked at contemporary science illustrations as well as medieval Indian miniature paintings from the 15th to the 18th century. My research questions have principally remained the same as last year and have gotten more refined since now I am looking at select aspects from broad fields of knowledge. I have identified four areas of my practice: text, image, voice, and performance, and need to figure out how they influence each other in the composition of an actual picture recitation, and how the traditional Indian storytelling formats can be adapted or inspire contemporary practice. I will analyze how scientific research can be used for creative narratives which have some basis in Indian genres, and lastly, how I will fulfill my main objective of the research, that is to decolonize the tradition of picture recitation through my practice. Before I begin, let me quickly talk about decolonization. Simply put, decolonization is to remove the effects of colonization, which is a global contemporary effort being undertaken in many parts of the world. The field of picture recitation was affected during colonization by the British in India in many ways. Firstly, since many narratives were based on Hindu mythology, a general censorship of the erotic aspects of the Hindu religion and imposition of Victorian morality and Protestant prudery affected the expression of this theme of passion through art, literature, and storytelling. Secondly, European hegemony dismissed civilizations with oral cultures as primitive, and with the imposition of writing undermined the power of the spoken word. Picture recitation songs, which were said to have been women's oral literature, were usurped by literate men who recorded it in writing. Thirdly, Western scholars, while writing about Indian art, relegated the picture recitation practices as folk art since the practitioners lived in rural communities, which has created a chasm between high art and folk art in India, as a result of which, despite dealing with contemporary events such as the release of the movie Titanic or the burning of the World Trade Center on 9/11, as you see here in details from scroll paintings used for picture recitation, these folk artists are barely recognized as contemporary Indian artists. Lastly, it also needs to be mentioned that when European colonizers filled their museums with artifacts from their colonies, immaterial aspects of artistic practices which could not be transported to Europe, such as performance, became disconnected from the material objects, and only those artifacts which found a place in museum came to be understood as art, which, however, was not the definition of art in the colonies, according to scholar Anita Seppa. One of the major scholars of decolonization, Walter Mignolo, says it is time to delink oneself from the tyranny of Western hegemony and invest in that which has been silenced and make visible what has been rendered invisible to affirm the presence of what has been declared absent. For his own decolonization, Walter Mignolo looked at scholarship from the global south instead of Europe, which inspired me to look at Indian aesthetics instead of Western aesthetics to define my studio practice. Here, one aspect from Indian aesthetics which I have chosen as the guiding principle of my studio practice is called rasa theory. Rasa, which is Sanskrit for juice, is the affective experience of the viewer of an artwork, which is transferred from the artist or the actor or the author via the work of art to the viewer. Rasa is analogous to the taste of food which is savored, sweet, spicy, salty, tangy, and similarly, there are nine affective states: the erotic, the heroic, the violent, disgust, fear, comic, tragic, fantastic, and tranquility, which can be expressed through the arts. Rasa theory was first mentioned in a treatise on drama by an Indian scholar in the year 300, and the author stated that any work of art that did not invest in the transference of rasa to the viewer was bound to fail. Rasa theory was applied across art, literature, drama, and dance in classical India, resulting in many similarities crisscrossing various mediums. For example, the erotic affect called Shringara Rasa was expressed through poetry, dance, in temple sculptures, etc., and this is the main rasa which I have tried to express in my short verses. Shringara Rasa has also influenced my image making, such as here, where I have contemplated the affective experiences of the body during love making. Having explained the main objectives of my research, I now move on to discussing how I conducted my studio practice. The research this year is a gift of my time in India due to relocating during the pandemic. Here, I am living with my in laws in their townhouse in the suburbs outside Kolkata, which has a terrace where the family has spent hours gardening, and I have spent time observing the weather phenomena and the passing of the seasons. This turning of the seasons is a central theme of another genre of medieval Indian poetry and songs known as Baramasa. After 13 years, I am living in my state of West Bengal for the length of over a year and have witnessed the beautiful monsoon and billowy autumn clouds with fresh eyes. These observations have merged in with scientific readings, the basic premise of which comes from research about the human microbiome, which states that microbes in the gut communicate with the brain via the spinal cord and affect our moods and behaviors. I extrapolate these observations to include the microbes of the skin and imagine how various fluids and atmospheric phenomena interact with the skin microbiome and how the various foods eaten during the various seasons provide nutrients for the gut microbes, which then cascade further chemical reactions in my body that ultimately makes me love, kiss, caress, and hug my lover. Just as I play around with scientific facts, I play around with many other existing bodies of knowledge to craft my practice while subverting the idea of human agency by making my microbiome my masters. Thus, chemicals from foods or changes in the skin microbes affect my ability to make love, which you can see here in my verses. Here on the left is a verse from an anthology of classical Sanskrit erotic poetry named Amarushataka, which has been my source of inspiration. You have rubbed the feathery patterns from your cheeks with your own palms. Sighs have removed the dew that rises from within your parted lips. Your breasts quaver, but it is from hard tears in your throat. Bitter girl, anger makes love to you, not I. And my verse, which includes information from phytochemistry, reads: an argument, and that's it. No good night, no sweet dreams kiss. Oh, curse the caramboxin neurotoxin of bewitching star fruits. I was still quarreling with you even in my dreams. And here is a glimpse of the image making process. On the left is an Indian miniature painting from the 15th century. In the center is a medical illustration which I constantly receive as posts from various science related groups on Facebook, and they merge together to form my digital illustration within which I have inscribed one of my verses. Mustardy carrots bathed in bubbling brine soak the sun in my stead and father new neurons in my head. The neurons sparkle fireworks of dopamine and oxytocin when smooth bed sheets churn ferocious waves that smash the pillow boats. Referring to the forests of microbes lining my skin and intestines, I have titled my series of illustrations The Forest on My Flesh. Greens of the bottle gourd cooked in mustard and poppy seeds, ambrosia for the bifidobacteria that pump up the musk behind my knees. On such days, your eyes swirl, you lock me in your arms, your nose digs inside my cave, and your tongue paints on its walls. The details you see here follow closely the logic of the science illustrations, keeping some elements such as this band of purple beads known as a phospholipid bilayer while inserting in it some symbols of my own. Have you been throwing my lace panties at the sun and fogging these November mornings? Bare bottoms under blankets soak vitamin D from the sheets, drying in yesterday afternoon's blaze. The D turns into dopamine as you churn inside me. My tongue sweeps over a dome of palm jaggery, jiggling the jaggery into a creamy caramel custard. As the streptococcus of my throat cuddle the proteobacteria of your hinds, your bums twitch. at the Richter scale of 1. Delighted, my tongue sticks out once again. From microbial lovers, now let me take you back to lovers in classical Indian arts through whom the erotic affect was conveyed. Dramatists and authors used different archetypes of lovers to describe the different phases and sentiments of a romantic relationship. For example, they suggested 8 kinds of heroines displaying 8 different sentiments regarding their union with their lovers. 7 of these 8 heroines wait for their lover to come to them, while only one goes out to meet her lover, often braving grave dangers. This archetype of a female lover or heroine is named Abhisarika. Many miniature paintings depict her running through a dark forest infested with demons and snakes on a stormy night, with lightning cracking above her head and in a posture where she turns to look back at her ankle bells that have slipped off her foot, but she is in such a hurry that she does not pick them up. In the following picture recitation, I ponder, why runs the Abhisarika? Lightning rips apart the bonds of nitrogen that spins down the raindrops to the actinomycetes of the soil, who joyfully diffuse petrichoral bouquets of geosmin and tyrosine that waft into lovers' nostrils, becoming dopamine in the mesolimbic pathways of the brain. The dopamine needs its own bard and ballad to sing of all it risks in pursuit of pleasure, suppresses inhibitions, makes us go get it, setting heroines on new adventures. The lightning of such storms illuminate the experimental arts lovers discover. And for those with no erotic manuscripts to guide, the best love is still made on a stormy night. Lightning that splits nitrogen bonds lovers, cascading its atoms from cloud to soil, from raindrops to fragrance to fireworks of dopamine in lovers' cerebrums. But should the alleyways of dopamine dead end when oblong pillows replace a lover, the fireworks explode within their crates, the moonbeams sting, the stormy night suffocates. Precisely when the first lightning strikes, ions of the air shiver her skin, shiver the beads of her ankle bells. Her feet cross the threshold and she bolts. Swelled with dopamine, the Abhisarika races. She fears not snakes nor the forest ghouls, rather flees the fireworks of an empty bed and the moonbeams that'll cinder her lonely soul. Lightning, custodian of the erotic arts, paid homage to in verses and paints. Cosmic repository of sexual power sets lovers to work in an instant flash. A torch that keeps itself alive with energy spent by lovers in union. But for those too lonely to pay tribute, it constricts and alights in carnal flames. Scared to miss out on her oblation, scared of cinders, the Abhisarika runs. Who is afraid of earthwormy snakes in front of the cosmic serpent's fangs? Lightning, source of rasa, the primeval life force, in megawatts and kilojoules, compressed of millennia of kisses and embraces, not only of humans, but all life forms. I hope you enjoyed the performance and could taste some aesthetic pleasure. Now, let me situate my practice in a wider context. There are many artists in the art science genre who make work about the body, but Max Ernst's painting, which is actually layered with paint on top of a scientific illustration of yeast cells and titled as a surreal poem, comes closest to the kind of work I am attempting. My interest in miniatures is also part of a global contemporary phenomena which has been termed as neo miniatures, made famous by artists Shazia Sikandar in the US and Khadim Ali in Australia, who have both studied this art form in Pakistan and are infusing it with contemporary elements. Reviving the art of miniatures in Pakistan was also a method to decolonize this art form and elevate it above the category of Oriental kitsch. If you found some of my works funny, that is due to the presence of humor from stand up comedy videos that I watch regularly on YouTube, which also informs my ideas of subversion. Subconsciously, the increasing presence of scientific imagery in product commercials has primed us to the images of bacteria, magnification, and internal body imagery long before COVID. Many products are popularizing scientific terminologies and concepts to the extent of even spelling out the names of chemical ingredients to educate their consumers. The recent win for the Nobel Prize in Physiology was covered by many news channels which used graphics from the Nobel Prize website, which you see here on the right. It depicts ion channels opening up due to the heat of chilies. I will not be surprised if in the near future cosmetic product commercials now also start using the symbol of ion channels to show their products entering our bodies. Since childhood, I am used to seeing religious narratives on folios painted with imagery and as reliefs carved in temples. And storytelling is very popular in India with religious mythologies playing on television. Other than this, I have been very active in elocution, drama, and Indian classical dances during my childhood and adolescent life, traces of which are still within my bodily memories and they inform my affinity for picture recitation, and all of them come into use when I perform. Thus, by investing in the erotic and in orature, as well as by uniting picture and recitation, I hope to remove the adverse effects of colonization from some genres of Indian arts. Finally, I would like to conclude by returning to my research plan and proposing next year's activities that will culminate into my final PhD submission. I will be composing a long poetry to perform picture recitation of about 15 minutes duration, along with producing a visual aid such as a scroll or a tapestry with the style of image making I have evolved this year. The narrative can be a longer rendition of the Abhisarika iconography which you have just witnessed, or a song about how microbes of my gut and skin have spent the cycle of 12 months tasting various foods and seasons while also interacting with the microbes of my lover every month. For this purpose, I plan to take workshops for voice training and storytelling and perhaps a refresher course in classical Indian dances. So, thank you everyone for your time and attention today. I hope I was able to transfer some rasa, some aesthetic pleasure to all of you, and I wish you all a very, very romantic day ahead.